Hi, and welcome to Faith, Hope, and Love During an Election. I am here with Sister Julia Walsh today, and Sister Julia is a Franciscan sister of Perpetual Adoration, and she is a blogger and a podcaster and many, many other things as well. She leads writing retreats and does all kinds of good work. So I'm so pleased that you're here today, Sister Julia, and I'd love for you to say something about yourself and also about the FSPA.
Thank you, Jen. Yeah, so I'm a Franciscan sister of Perpetual Adoration. Our community is headquartered in La Crosse, Wisconsin. It's the main convent, the mother house is called St. Rose Convent. And there we have a practice of perpetual adoration until this past February on Ash Wednesday, the ritual drastically changed. But prior to that, it had been 24 hours, 7 days a week, 365. We would always have at least two people in front of the Blessed Sacrament exposed, praying for the needs of the world and intentions that came in from all over the place. While many of us sisters serve and companion and love and teach and minister in a lot of different ways, lots of roles. I was formed as an educator. That was my background before I came to community. So I began my ministry teaching high school, and then other things began to emerge and evolve. And yeah, so I'm like one of the sisters in our community who lives away from La Crosse, Wisconsin. I'm ministering here in Chicago, where I've been for about a year now. And I serve as a spiritual director, as you mentioned, a writer. My blog is messyjesusbusiness.com. And I started experimenting with podcasting once the pandemic began as well. And I dabble in jail ministry and retreat ministry. So yeah, I do a lot of different things. And I'm also pretty involved, I would say, in a different way than some, but I am involved in and advocating for justice and justice ministry as well. So yeah, thank you, Jen, for having me.
Yeah, you're welcome. I'm so delighted that we get to talk about these things. We were talking before we started recording, and you had directed my attention to a document that was published by the Catholic Church about civic responsibility and voting. And one line really stuck out to me on it, which was, politics is a noble mission to promote the common good. And I it was such a hopeful and aspirational statement. I think right now many of us, I'm speaking for myself, of course, feel like politics is a mess, and politics is so often corrupt or corrupting. And so I love the idea of changing the frame and seeing it as a possible way to promote the common good. Do you want to talk about that, what that means to you?
Yeah. So, and actually that quote, I think, comes from Faithful Citizenship, which, if I'm not mistaken, every presidential election year, the U.S. bishops, the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops in Washington, D.C., publish a document called Faithful Citizenship, just sort of reminding the Catholic public, the ordinary person, these are the principles. There's no actual way to vote as a Catholic, but these are our faith teachings. These are the principles of Catholic social teaching. These are the things we keep in mind. And the church documents, the Catholic Church documents, speak a lot about the formation of a personal conscience, which is takes a lot of work and is quite complicated when our society is so, we're so inundated with messages that kind of counteract this Christian vision of the kingdom of God, of peace and justice, of hope, love, and faith, as you say. And so I, as a Catholic, I find it very fascinating. I've always been very fascinated with the combination of faith and politics, and how the two things can work together for the greater good, for the common good. And since both things tend to be, religion and politics tend to be about power, they can be misused to damage people even at times.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, you're right about it being messy. But how do we keep our eyes on that vision of the common good, which is a very Catholic way of thinking about it, to tell you the truth. A lot of Catholic teaching is always pointing to the common good and what that means. And I suppose for myself, it's a recognition of the sacredness and the holy in all people and all things, and recognizing that the more we are truly living out love in the way that Christ is calling us to, the less people are going to become our enemies. And I'm probably personally navigating all the mess in a way that goes up and down between like discouragement and hope, or is getting frustrated with some of the messages I'm hearing, or some of the ways that I see the truth being dishonored or warped. And then at other times feeling more like an explorer, where I'm sort of fascinated by what I'm discovering about other people and about society and about the things that people believe, or what moves people's hearts and minds and what doesn't move hearts and minds and behaviors and transform society. So if I'm entering it more into like an explorer who's out to make discoveries, then I find that it's a lot easier to keep focused on the vision of the common good than turning to a place of discouragement.
Right.
Yeah.
The idea of the explorer, because I think when we do engage with things with curiosity, then we don't kind of get brought down by discouragement. Just to say, okay, why is this happening? Or who are these people? Or what is the story behind that?
Mm-hmm.
I love that. That explorer idea is a great one.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that brings me to another question I wanted to ask you is, when you're engaging with people with whom you disagree, do you have some best practices, either as a spiritual director or as a sister or just as a person in the world? Like, many things that you keep in mind when you try to engage with people who are different from you?
Yeah. One of the things that I'm frequently thinking about is it's in that framework of, I'm an explorer here, and I'm here to notice, I'm here to discover. But I think I'm really influenced by an essay that is by Margaret Wheatley, and I can't remember the title, but I'll send it to you. And in that essay, she writes about how one must be willing to be disturbed. And how, for some reason in our culture, we're so taught, like, preserve your comfort, preserve your safety, like protect your independence, protect your freedom. But when we're in a place that's uncomfortable, when we're hearing something that we find just like appalling or oppressive, that we're entering into that space of discomfort with more of a curiosity and more of a space of, noticing, this is really disturbing me, then that can lead us to a new discovery about ourselves or the world, instead of leading us to a space of defensiveness. Mm-hmm. And if we're not out to like prove a point or, to be the one who has the strongest voice, but it's more of a space of sacred listening and recognizing like how God is at work truly in every single person. And we must give each person, it's charitable for us to allow them the grace that God is working out a conversion in them and in us. And part of that conversion can only occur if we are all allowing ourselves to go to those places of discomfort, because that's where conversion occurs, and ultimately transformation for a society overall. So I think that's really what it's about for me, and that's how I am able to maintain my calm most of the time. And it's heart-wrenching when I discover that I've disappointed other people, or they dislike my point of view, or maybe something I'm presenting, and they react to it. Or maybe I just come out messy and not as articulate as I would prefer. And so then there's this, this messy place that we go to together, and there's a reaction and a detraction, or all the things happen. But like, what God is calling us to as a human race, as people who share a planet, is this recognition of where our common grounds are, and greater communion overall. And that's only going to occur if people are constantly in a space of like, oh, this is interesting that I'm reacting this way. Wow, I didn't even know I had that strong of a feeling. And noticing that disturbance, and then taking later and reflecting and praying over it, and bringing it to the Gospels and bringing it to Christ. Yeah.
I've used the word messy a number of times in describing, because
I can't help it. It's sort of my spirituality.
right. And your blog, of course, is messyjesusbusiness.com, right? And
yes.
But it is such a messy time that we're living in. I mean, both with the pandemic and, people starting to look at how can they dismantle systemic racism, dismantle meaning maybe make a bigger mess, while we're trying to figure out how to make things more just, and so messy is a great word for this year and for everything that's going on. When you named your blog that, when was that? And like, what was your process in choosing that name and deciding that was the best way you could describe your work and your calling?
That's so fascinating that you're asking. So actually it was 10 years ago, 2010. At that time I was blogging a little, I was contributing pieces here and there, a few places. And one of the sisters in my community said, you really should start your own blog. And I was very overwhelmed by the idea, but I took it to prayer, and I did some brainstorming, and consulted with some people. And then I just did the classic brainstorm, list out as many ideas as I could thing. And I sent the document to somebody, and then I forgot about it. And then I had a dream, and in the dream, the phrase "messy Jesus business" came, and I emailed her, and I was like, I think I have the name. It just came to me in a dream. And she said, yeah, and it's on your list twice. You repeated. I was like, oh, okay, so that's clearly meant to be the name. But I think it was greatly influenced by what I was going through at that point in my life. It was 10 years ago was my first or second year of teaching full-time and living as a vowed sister. And early part of becoming a sister, I had a tragic accident. So I was going through a healing and recovery process. And that was a lot about being accepting my brokenness, and accepting that I am weak, and I need to live in community, and I'm always gonna show up a little less than adequate, and that's okay. And then also in my classroom, how I had this somehow ingrained idea that a perfect teacher had a very tidy desk and a very tidy classroom, a very tidy book bag, and everything was orderly and organized all the time. And I was trying to live up to that expectation that I put upon myself, and finding it impossible and feeling like a failure every single day, and realizing that didn't match who I was. It didn't match even what the gospel tells us about how it works to follow Jesus. And instead, Jesus is asking us constantly to, give up what we have and follow him into the mystery, and to go to places that are dangerous, places that are confusing, to go into villages and proclaim the good news, and be prepared for the fact that people might reject us, and be ready to respond in ways that are merciful to that. So it was sort of like this clicking of things that occurred, where I realized this old vision of like being a Christian, being good, being a sister, being a teacher was all a very neat and tidy, orderly life. And in reality, that sort of rigidity or even a vision of that sort of structure was not going to match with what was necessary in the flourishing of the reign of God externally and internally in myself, and how ultimately, I mean, when you really break open the scriptures, we discover that the covenant that God of love that God has given us is really a story of God moving and creating order out of chaos, and it's God who does the creativity in moving us from a place of chaos to a place of order. And we just get to cooperate and show up every day and say, what am I saying yes to today, God? What do you want of me, right? And our God is a God of surprises. And so it's constantly, just like all the prophets and disciples and apostles before us, like leading us to places of mystery and unfolding. And it's, yeah, a mess. It's a mess. I'm just thinking right now of St. Paul and like how many shipwrecks did he have to endure to get the good news out? And why did I ever think that following Jesus was going to be safe? Can't be at all.
When you said that, and I remember you telling me that the ritual of the perpetual adoration in La Crosse was ending, or the fact that it was 24 hours a day always. And it's striking to me that, your order is the perpetual adoration, and there was that literal practice of it. Is something that you talk about with your sisters, what that means that in a less literal way, like if you're not, that particular ritual has changed, of course, in 2020, which has had all kinds of disruptions for everyone across the globe. But do you see it moving into more of and less of a physical ritual? And do you understand that former ritual in a different way now that it's not happening all the time? I don't know.
Yeah, good question. And it's, to clarify, we as sisters don't say that our practice has ended, but we say that it's changed. And part of the work that happened in our committee, the committee that studied it and then presented sort of a case for the need for a shift to us, some of their work was studying the meaning of the word perpetual, which in my previous understanding really created this understanding of constant and uninterrupted. And yet if you look up the word perpetual in the dictionary, there's another definition which means that it's continuous, it starts and ends. And so now our practice is that from every day from 6 a.m. to 10 p.m. There's adoration. And because it's continuous every day, it's still perpetual adoration. And we were also reminded of, I think it's even says so in the dictionary, that I'm sorry, I can't remember what flower it is. maybe a geranium or something, where it's continuing to bloom, right? Even though the bloom, you have to take off the old blooms. Mm-hmm. And that was a beautiful reframing. I did write an essay about the change to our practice and it was published in America in, I believe, April, in America Magazine. And so that's one place where I sort of reflected on it. But yeah, your question, are you asking like how the change in the practice connects to the shifting of and the adaptations in general that are needed from us at this time? Is that?
Or how I guess I was thinking about you personally, but I should be more in a corporate way because you're part of a sisterhood and an order. But I was thinking about for you, because that is a shift. And I remember, once when we talked about it, maybe last summer or something like that, you knew it was coming for some time, I think. but there was a sense of, of sort of not, you didn't seem like you were grieving it in any way, but it seemed like, a disappointment, or, just change is hard, any kind of change to the way we understand our faith, or the way we practice it can unsettling. But I just wonder if you had any other things that are sort of filling up a gap, if indeed that left a gap for you in some way. I think our spiritual change and evolve over time, and so I was curious about that.
Yeah. So me personally, I haven't been to La Crosse since February. Since the first weekend that the practice shifted, that Saturday after Ash Wednesday was the last time I was there. And yeah, there is grief and there is sadness. And I think that honoring that is part of the prayer, is part of what I bring to God. There's a disappointment. I had some sort of false, maybe even naive expectation that the religious life that I entered was going to be the religious life that I would experience my entire life, which is fascinating because I've also had constant conversations since entering religious life about what is the future of religious life, and that's something we're always chewing on. So there's this like paradoxical dance, isn't there? And anytime something shifts in a practice, in our community, in our life, in our world, where we're like, oh, well, I didn't really always expect it to be like this, but it came a little too soon, or I wasn't ready, or could I have ever been ready for this? And I think I'm thinking of like how so many of us have had to change the way that we worship during this time, and restructure our lives, and discover new disciplines, new ways of channeling out. Or carving out, I should say, like this is the prayer time. This is the time that I tune into online mass and I pray alongside people virtually. And yeah, it's a total shift. And then you realize you miss the babies crying and the elder snoring or sneezing or something, and it's like that physical embodiment of our faith is essential. But there's new ways. I think the Spirit can invite us to new ways of creating ritual for ourselves, creating community, creating prayer, honoring the sacred, which is around us constantly, right?
Yeah, and if nothing else, this year has taught us that all of our plans and our sort of, I'm speaking for myself, my dedication to being so organized and so, such a planner and having everything locked down, it can go away in a flash, all the things that we plan and all the things that we count on. And even, I think in the early months of the country shutting down, I was dealing really on a personal level with identity issues, because part of, I think, the way that I had kind of gotten into a habit was kind of a productivity part of my identity. I thought of myself as, well, I've got all these tasks to do and I'll do them. And I've got this conference here and I've got that, deadline there. And it was all written in stone. And all of a sudden, it went away. And I had to think, okay, well, who am I when I'm not just all my deadlines and all my plans, which I think is really healthy. I think it's an invitation for a reset. And I took it. I took that invitation and I'm glad about it. But yeah, this whole year, it's interesting that ritual changed in 2020, which is a year of, it didn't year or next year, but in this odd year, but yeah. Now, of course, this series is about thinking about faith, hope, and love in an election. What is your best hope as these next months unfold? Either specifically about the outcome of this election, or what conversations do you hope people will be having? What policy changes do you hope might occur? Do you want to speak to this particular political moment?
Yeah, thanks. I have a lot of hopes. So I'm thinking, oh, there's so many things I want to say. I suppose I really just, Jen, I just really hope for a church and a society both that is focused on the poor and the marginalized and the oppressed. Because then I would see that both church and society is mimicking Christ and living out the gospel that he proclaimed. So and it feels super complicated, right? Because I also, at the same time, really hope for a society that is honoring diversity and appreciates diversity. And I think that part of the dynamic, the squabbles that we're in and all of the bickering and the tribal tendencies that we sort of have fallen into as a people is due to the fact that people are absorbing this attitude of like cancel culture and like if you're offending me, so I'm not going to be in relationship with you anymore, which totally counters the vision of the kingdom of God, where in which we're all called to communion, all people are included, everyone is at the table, everyone, like literally everyone, and we're actually truly loving those that drive us crazy, those that frustrate us, that hurt us, our enemies is the biblical word for it. So like it's this great blending of like both and of like everyone needs to be included, the diversity is appreciated, but yet those who have been the most marginalized, the most oppressed, most silenced, their voices are the voices that we lift up and we listen to. So I've been really in myself grappling and struggling with this question, especially since the murder of George Floyd, with like, when do I need to step back as a white woman and let people of color have a voice? In which ways can I become an ally? In which ways can I just be a student? In which times can I just listen and learn and allow my heart and my mind to be totally transformed, really experience true conversion because of the stories, because of those encounters. Yeah. So there's a lot of emphasis in the Catholic Church about the promotion of the culture of life, and how if human life is truly valued and we recognize all human life as sacred, from the womb to the tomb, as we say, then that's going to shift the framework in which we relate to everyone, because we're going to recognize how everybody is holy, and we're going to like treat them in a way that honors them for that. But I suppose that framework matters a lot to me. But I've been noticing in some of the reading and thinking that I've been doing lately that my framework personally is probably much more about the lens of the poor and the oppressed. And when I read the Gospels, I see that Jesus is centering a lot of his attention on those that are on the margins in his time. Certainly there's a lot of overlap there, right? Because a lot of people who feel as if their life are not being valued are also the people whose voices are not being valued, life and voices. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So what do I hope for? I mean, I really just hope we listen and we appreciate each other. It's pretty basic, respect diversity or celebrate it even. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I will say that it's somewhat related. In my early 20s, when I was grappling with this sense of like, I think God wants me to be a sister, and yet I don't even know if I like being Catholic, but I have to be Catholic to be a sister, and all this, and trying to make sense of it. As I learned more about the church's teachings and practices, I came to recognize that like the richness of Catholicism is its diversity. And the reason I love being Catholic and feel like this is my church, this is my home where I belong, is because it's so wide. And you can be a very conservative person and a very liberal, in your neighbor, same person that you're praying to in the next pew can be extremely liberal, and you can vote differently. You can even have different spiritual practices, but we gather around the same table. So there's that width to the church, but then there's also this great depth of going all the way back to I think even our desert fathers and mothers and the early spiritual practices of the church, and then the church fathers and mothers, and and all the ways that there's this richness in the saints, in the communion of saints, in the traditions, in the understandings of scripture and its richness, as well as the beautiful diversity that's found in community. So that I think is part of the richness, the vision of the common good, is appreciating that diversity and welcoming it and recognizing, even though this person votes differently than I do, they know something that I don't. And we have values in common. So how can we listen to each other and love one another and discover what they know that I don't know, and vice versa. If we're appreciating that diversity and knowing that none of us has a total glimpse of the whole truth, only God that has the whole truth, but we can all listen and learn from one another in order to see the truth better, right?
Yeah, I love the way you said that. Yeah, and I think that goes back to what you were saying earlier about being an explorer and being curious and approaching others with that sort of being an explorer and about their stories and what wisdom do they have, or what do they have to offer that you otherwise be exposed to. So
and it's interesting, isn't it, Jen, how we all want to be in spaces where we feel like we can be most fully ourselves, don't we? And we can feel like we feel this freedom to be transparent about, this is what I believe, this is my experience, this is who I am. And we don't experience a sense of judgment. And unfortunately, I think part of the political climate is we're being taught by leaders and speakers and, in the messages that we should be judging the other, but instead of needing the other. And so I know that when I'm in a space where I feel like I have a little bit of fear, insecurity about being judged by the other, sometimes it could be as simple as people think that a sister should be wearing a veil and I don't have one. Are they going to see that I'm really a sister here? and having to let that all go and just say, oh, no, you know what? I am truly fully myself, and I'm truly fully here. And, take it or leave it. I'm going to find my freedom in Christ. But I am here. I don't want to judge you. You can judge me if you want, but that's not going to stop me from loving you and having compassion, having mercy, having forgiveness, being ready to see you as a friend and as someone that I need, even if you've decided you don't need me. Because in the kingdom of God, we do need each other. We do. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I don't know if I hope that helps. I don't know if that makes
totally does. And I think that puts a good button on this conversation. And that's a wonderful closing thought. We need each other. And
we so do.
Yeah. Well, I want to invite everyone to visit Sister Julia online at messyjesusbusiness.com. And on Twitter, what's your Twitter handle again? It's
just at Julia FSPA, as in the initials for my community.
Yeah. All right. And you're active on Twitter and you've got your podcast, and I hope that people will be able to continue to discover your work. And
thanks, Jen.
These things. So thank you so much for being with us today.
So much fun. It was so fun to talk about these things. God bless you. God bless everyone who's listening. And let us just love and listen to each other, people. That's what God needs of us. That's what we're called to. Peace and all good. Thanks.